Tonight's headlines from Iraq. Huge crowds mourn murdered religious leader. Is Shiite majority turning on U.S. forces? And the road to 9/11. A new book says the FBI missed plenty of opportunities to follow the terror trail.
Peter Lance says his own investigation goes far beyond the congressional joint inquiries into the 9/11 attacks.
What we found, and this has never been made public, was that Osama bin Laden had an effective al-Qaeda cell in Brooklyn, New York, as early as March of 1991. Osama bin Laden directly bankrolled the original World Trade Center bombing operation, and Osama bin Laden directly bankrolled 9/11.
According to Lance, he uncovered evidence that was available to federal agents, but which they never actually analyzed or acted upon.
I show for the first time that the New York office of the FBI, the bin Laden office of origin, basically was onto these guys the same cell as far back as 1989 and dropped the ball not just once, not just a dozen times, but dozens and dozens of times.
He traces these lapses back to 1989 and FBI surveillance of a group of Middle Eastern men at a Caverton, Long Island shooting range. Yet, inexplicably, the FBI suddenly stopped watching after just 1 month.
Of the men photographed by the FBI in 1989, 3 of them were later convicted in the original World Trade Center bombing. 1 was convicted in the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. 1 was convicted in the Day of Terror plot to blow up bridges and tunnels around Manhattan.
The Calverton men became devoted followers of blind cleric Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. Rahman brought in professional bomber Ramzi Yousef, and the men began to plot the first World Trade Center bombing.
It was absolutely possible for the FBI to have identified and stopped Yousef in the fall of '92 as he built the bomb. If they had stopped Ramzi Yousef in 1992, they would have stopped 9/11.
Lance says the FBI could have stopped Yousef because they had an informant, Ahmad Salem, already in place. He was close enough to take this video of a celebration that included several members of the original Calverton group, and to hear whispers about a bomb plot. But inter-office fighting at the FBI forced Salem to quit, leaving a chilling warning.
The last thing Ahmad Salem said to Nancy Floyd, his control agent, before he left was, "Don't call me when the bombs go off."
There's been an explosion.
4 months later, Ramzi Yousef placed a truck bomb under the World Trade Center, killing 6 and injuring 1,000. The FBI was then told to get informant Salem back in Sheikh Rahman's network.
And in 2 months, he set up a sting operation that rounded up the blind Sheikh and 11 others in a plot to blow up bridges and tunnels around Manhattan.
But World Trade Center bomber Yousef got away. He fled to the Philippines, where he began to lay the groundwork for 9/11. According to Lance's sources, the FBI was still missing the big picture.
Once they had convicted all these guys, they thought the danger was over. The threat to New York had been diminished. Well, in fact, what they didn't do or connect the larger dots that tied all these men directly to bin Laden and al-Qaeda and to a much broader international conspiracy.
The attacks of 9/11 set in motion a chain of events that culminated in the war in Iraq. Now, a new book being released today, 1,000 Years for Revenge, International Terrorism and the FBI, details what it says were failures by the FBI to follow up important leads that could have prevented those attacks. In 1993, terrorist leader Sheikh Omar Rahman was indicted, and 4 others were on trial for the bombing of the World Trade Center. But according to author Peter Lance, the FBI missed the clues that could have foiled the later 9/11 attacks.
They still didn't see the bigger picture. They still didn't see Osama bin Laden's presence, and they still didn't see that this was an international ongoing conspiracy.
Ramzi Yousef, the bomb maker responsible for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, had fled to the Philippines, where police discovered his bomb factory. Yousef again escaped, but his accomplice was arrested and spilled the chilling plot to Philippine Police Colonel Rodolfo Mendoza. The police colonel, Mendoza, is seen in this taped interview talking to writer Lance.
And then later he said that there was a plan at least to hijack planes and fly them into targets in the United States.
Targets in the United States, CIA building in Langley, Virginia.
And then did he mention any other targets to you? He mentioned...
Later, told me about possibility of hitting Pentagon. He told me also that there is an unidentified nuclear facility.
Mendoza provided one more piece of information.
And he said there were 10 Islamic pilots at that moment in 1995 in America training in U.S. flight schools.
Colonel Mendoza, says Lance, gave the evidence to the U.S. Embassy, including information that Osama bin Laden was funding Ramzi Yousef's plots. This once secret FBI analysis, written later that year, appears to confirm the evidence was passed on to the FBI, stating that Yousef in Murad also discussed future attacks in the U.S., including possibly flying a plane filled with explosives into the CIA building.
And by diminishing the evidence that Boogie Mendoza turned over to them in 1995, they again incredibly dropped the ball on 9/11.
In February 1995, Yousef was captured in Pakistan. His uncle, Khalid Shaikh Mohammed, a high-ranking al-Qaeda member, was arrested this past March. Widely considered the mastermind of the 9/11 plot, Khalid Shaikh Mohammed, Lance maintains, was implementing his nephew's plan. The same plan that Philippine police had uncovered and, Lance says, the FBI never acted upon.
They didn't want to admit, the senior officials in the FBI did not want to admit that they could have stopped Ramzi Yousef. And they certainly didn't want to draw a line between Ramzi Yousef and bin Laden and the attacks of 9/11.
Peter Lance says the basic problem is the FBI is designed to solve crimes, not prevent them.
There's little doubt in my mind that al-Qaeda is an amazingly lethal entity, that bin Laden continues to call the shots surrounded by these radical Egyptians, and that in fact they will strike America again sometime in the near future. There's no doubt in my mind.
For accuracy and fairness, CBS News requested an interview with the FBI about all this. But the agency said that officials there have just begun looking into the charges made in this book, and that the FBI is not yet in a position to respond.